Most careers follow a pattern that is rarely discussed openly. The early years feel like rapid movement, like standing on an escalator that suddenly began accelerating. Promotions arrive, salaries climb, and the future appears mathematically predictable. At 25, earning more each year feels almost automatic because the gap between experience and opportunity is wide, and the labor market is actively searching for people who are still climbing. During this phase, income growth feels like a natural law, something that simply happens with time. But somewhere in the mid-30s, the escalator slows. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly enough that many people barely notice the shift at first. Raises become smaller. Promotions become rarer. The space above begins to narrow. The income curve that once climbed sharply starts to flatten, and this flattening creates what economists often call the professional income plateau. The plateau does not mean income stops growing entirely. It means the rate of growth slows significantly compared to the early years. The psychological effect of this shift is powerful, because most financial expectations were formed during the period when growth felt effortless. When the brain becomes accustomed to a certain speed of progress, any slowdown feels like something has gone wrong, even when the system is behaving exactly as designed. To understand why this happens, it helps to step back and look at the structure of modern labor markets. Early in a career, employees are moving through wide tiers of opportunity. Entry-level roles are abundant, and the first few promotions are largely based on skill development and basic competence. Each step upward represents a relatively small increase in responsibility, but a noticeable increase in income. Because the early ladder is wide, movement feels constant. As careers advance, the ladder narrows. Management layers are smaller than entry-level layers. Senior leadership roles are smaller still. Every promotion upward removes multiple positions beneath it. This structure creates a natural bottleneck. The system does not have enough higher-level roles for everyone to continue climbing at the same speed indefinitely. This structural narrowing creates the plateau that many professionals encounter around their mid-30s or early 40s. By this stage, a person may already occupy a stable role with solid income, yet the path upward is no longer governed by simple performance metrics. Advancement begins to depend on organizational needs, timing, leadership turnover, and strategic shifts inside the company. While the professional ladder narrows, another system begins to move in the opposite direction: personal expenses. In many economies, the mid-30s coincide with a period when financial obligations increase. Housing costs become larger because people move from small apartments into larger homes. Family expenses begin to appear, whether through childcare, education planning, or broader household responsibilities. Insurance, healthcare, and long-term planning gradually become more significant parts of the monthly financial structure. What makes this stage financially interesting is not the absolute level of income, but the interaction between slowing income growth and rising cost structures. During the early career years, income growth often outpaces lifestyle costs. A raise of 15% can easily absorb a small increase in rent or transportation. But once the plateau begins, raises may drop to 3 or 4% annually, while large expenses remain fixed or continue increasing. At this point, the mathematics of personal finance begin to shift in subtle ways. Consider a simple example. A professional earning the equivalent of $60,000 per year who receives a 10% raise experiences a $6,000 increase in income. Early in a career, this difference can noticeably improve lifestyle flexibility. But if that same person later earns $100,000 and receives a 3% raise, the increase is only $3,000. The absolute income is higher, but the rate of improvement feels smaller. The human brain tends to evaluate progress based on acceleration rather than total distance. When progress slows, even if the situation remains objectively stable, people experience a psychological sensation that their financial life has stalled. This perception is one of the reasons the income plateau often feels more dramatic than it actually is. There is another factor quietly shaping this phase of financial life: the difference between labor income and asset income. Early in a career, nearly all financial progress comes from labor. Time is exchanged for salary, and increases in pay depend on performance and career movement. But labor income has a structural ceiling because time itself is limited. Even highly paid professionals eventually reach a point where additional hours cannot significantly increase their earnings. Asset income behaves differently. Assets, such as investments, businesses, or intellectual property, operate on systems that are not strictly limited by hours worked. Over long periods, these systems can grow independently of daily labor. Historically, many individuals who move beyond the professional income plateau do so not by dramatically increasing their salary, but by gradually shifting part of their financial growth into asset-based systems. This shift rarely happens instantly. It often begins quietly, with small investments or side systems that initially seem insignificant compared to a primary salary. Over time, however, the mathematics of compounding begins to operate. While salary growth slows because organizations have fixed structures, asset growth can continue expanding through reinvestment and time. Understanding this difference does not mean abandoning a career or assuming that assets will automatically solve financial challenges. Instead, it highlights the underlying mechanics that shape income patterns across modern economies. Careers provide stability, structure, and reliable cash flow. Assets provide scalability and long-term expansion. When both systems operate together, financial growth can continue even after the professional income plateau appears. From a historical perspective, this pattern has existed in many different economic eras. In industrial economies of the 20th century, workers often experienced similar income plateaus once they reached senior positions within factories or corporate hierarchies. The early years involved rapid wage growth as workers gained skills, but long-term financial advancement often depended on savings, property ownership, or participation in broader economic growth. Today, the pattern remains, although the specific details vary across industries and regions. Technology sectors may offer longer periods of rapid salary expansion, while traditional industries may plateau earlier. But the structural shape of the curve is remarkably consistent: fast growth early, stabilization in the middle years, and gradual increases afterward. What changes during the plateau is not opportunity itself, but the type of opportunity available. Instead of relying solely on promotions, individuals begin thinking more systemically about how their financial life is structured. Income becomes less about a single source and more about the interaction between multiple streams operating at different speeds. This shift is often subtle. It might involve redirecting a portion of income toward long-term investments, participating in ownership structures within a company, or building intellectual assets such as expertise, content, or intellectual property that can generate value beyond hourly labor. Each of these systems operates slowly at first, but over time, they create additional layers of financial resilience. The key psychological adjustment during this stage is recognizing that the plateau is not necessarily a failure of progress. Instead, it is a transition point within the economic life cycle of a career. Early growth was driven by learning and mobility. Mid-career stability reflects accumulated expertise and responsibility. The next stage often depends on how individuals position themselves within broader financial systems. Seen from this perspective, the income plateau becomes less mysterious. It is the natural result of how organizations are structured, how labor markets allocate roles, and how human lives evolve over time. Once this pattern becomes visible, the emotional weight surrounding it tends to fade. The slowdown in salary growth stops feeling like an unexpected obstacle and begins to look more like a predictable stage within a larger financial timeline. And when that shift in perspective happens, many people start approaching money differently. Instead of focusing exclusively on the next raise, they begin examining the systems that shape financial momentum over decades rather than years. The plateau, in this sense, does not represent the end of growth. It simply marks the point where the mechanics of growth begin to change.